Hi, we're going to read From Front Desk by Kelly Yang, Chapter 19. Chapter 19 begins on page 84. Lupe and I became inseparable. Whereas before we were best friends, bound by lies, now we shared a secret truth. I stopped pretending that I always wore long pants and long sleeves, even on days when it was 102 degrees, because I was always cold. The real reason was because sunscreen was too expensive. Or that I was saving my cookie from lunch for after PE, when really I was saving it for my parents. She stopped pretending she hated sports. Turns out she also had no medical insurance. She and her family were immigrants too. They'd come over from Mexico when she was 3. We told each other everything. Well, not everything. I didn't tell her my dad sometimes let people stay at the motel for free. It wasn't that I thought Lupe would tell on us. I just thought some things were better kept as secrets. Kind of like the security camera we didn't have, even though the sign says we did. One day, while doing my math homework, I had to answer a question about how much money a flower shop made in a month. It was a fairly basic question. I solved it, no problem. But it got me thinking, how much money did the Calavista make? I'd never actually calculated it out before. Curious, I pulled out the ledger from the bottom drawer of the front desk. The ledger was in this big black book my dad kept with meticulous records of how many customers we had each day. I ran my fingers over the names of the customers. On any given day at the Calavista, we had about 20 customers, including the weeklies. Mr. Yao kept the first 15 as per his revised deal, and my parents got $5 per person for the other 5. But say we got to keep all $20 per customer and didn't have to share with evil Mr. Yao, how much would we make? I lined the numbers up neatly on my paper and started doing the math. My eyes boggled at the number, $12,000. That's how much we made for Mr. Yao last month. My parents, on the other hand, only got $750. At that rate, it would take them over a year to make what Mr. Yao made in just 1 month. Mr. Yao wasn't on just any old rich roller coaster. He was on one of those crazy upside-down, hair-rising, screaming your head off roller coasters. And we were the people operating it for him. Of course, he did own the place, and he had to pay for electricity and stuff, but still. The next day at school, I went to the library. "Can I help you?" Mrs. Matthews, the librarian, asked as she looked up from a reference book. "I want to look up the price of buying a motel," I said. Mrs. Matthews raised her eyebrows. "It's for a math project," I quickly added. "I see," she said. She turned back to her computer and started typing. "All right, let's see what we can find." She drummed her fingers on her desk as she waited for the computer to load. "Looks like a motel costs anywhere between $300,000 to $1 million. "Did you say $1 million? Mrs. Matthews nodded. "Yep," Mrs. Matthews said, "even more for some of the nicer ones." "Well, that did it. There's no way we could ever buy a roller coaster." "Oh, look," Mrs. Matthews said, chuckling at the computer. "What is it?" "There's an old couple in Vermont looking to give away their motel. Says that they're holding an essay contest to determine who to give it to." Mrs. Matthews said, "Isn't that sweet?" "Can you, I swallowed hard. Sorry, my heart was beating so fast I could hardly get the words out. "Can you print that out for me?" Over and over again I read the words. A couple in Vermont wanted to give their motel away. They'd been running it for years, and now they were both in their 70s. Instead of selling it, they were holding an essay contest. The deadline was not until after Thanksgiving. There was an entry fee, though, and it wasn't cheap. $300. But look at the essay topic. What would you do if you owned a motel? This was it. This was our ticket onto the good roller coaster. Carefully, I hid the piece of paper inside a library book and smuggled it back to class. I didn't want my classmates to see it. $300 was nothing to them, and a bunch of them were probably great riders. If they saw it, they'd all want to enter, and then I'd be doomed. I clutched the book tightly with both hands and walked back to class, passing Lupe on the way to my seat. I slid into my seat and glanced over at her. She arched her eyebrows. "What's up?" And I shrugged my shoulder. "Nothing much." "All right, kids, listen up," Mrs. Douglas said. "Today we're going to learn about China." A boy behind me raised his hand. "Yes, Stuart? Is China in Japan?" Stuart asked. Jason turned around and glared at him. "No, idiot, it's not in Japan." Stuart shriveled in his seat. "Well, where's China then?" he asked. "In China," Jason said. "Oh." Mrs. Douglas told Jason and Stuart both to hush, and she started talking about the imperial era and Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. She showed us a picture of Qin Shi Huang, and I don't know where Mrs. Douglas got her picture from, but in the picture, Qin Shi Huang's eyes were ridiculously slanted. His eyebrows went all the way up to his forehead. The kids in the front row couldn't stop cracking up. Every time Mrs. Douglas wrote something on the board, they would turn around and make slanted eyes at me and Jason. This prompted Jason to raise his hand. "Excuse me, Mrs. Douglas. I'd just like to clarify. I'm not Chinese. I'm Taiwanese." "Oh, okay," Mrs. Douglas said. Stuart raised his hand again. "Is that in Japan?" he asked. "No, you moron," Jason yelled. "That's not in Japan either." As Mrs. Douglas reprimanded Jason for calling Stuart a moron, I sat very quietly in my seat. I knew I should have felt glad that Jason clarified to everyone that he was not the same as me, but I couldn't help but feel a little sad too, because now when the kids in the first row turned around, they only made slanted eyes at me. And that's the end of chapter 19.